Welcome to the Selling with Influence podcast, where we show you how to sell more of your products and services consistently, predictably, and profitably without having to offer discounts, quote lower margins, or compete on price in a race to the bottom just to get the business. My name is Dwayne Huff, founder and CEO of Influence Seminars, and I am your host. Hey, JR, man, it is so good to see you, and I'm honored and thankful that you chose to spend some time with me today. Doing this interview, I can't wait to hear about all of the exciting stories and experience that you've had in the sales game. But before we jump in, I'd like to give you the opportunity to kind of introduce yourself and tell us about, kind of where you started out in sales and kind of where you are today. Bring us through that and any success stories or war stories or anything that you'd like to share about that process.
Sure. Well, thanks, Dwayne, for having me on. I appreciate it, and looking forward to our discussion. I started off in sales because I needed a job, quite honestly. I had been a professional musician for years, and yeah, it was okay, but it wasn't great. So I talked myself into, or my way into a sales job with a medical equipment company. And what I learned was that for some reason, technical buyers love to buy from me. And I quickly found myself selling literally double what the next sales rep was selling.
That's very cool. So let me just jump in right there. And we didn't talk about this before, and I don't think this came up. As a professional musician, what did you play?
I was a card carrying union member, professional trumpet and flugelhorn player.
No, we did not talk about this. I don't know if I told you this. I got my degree in music performance on saxophone.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, well, and so I'm like you, going back to what you said about, I needed a job. And but I'm a gigging musician. Actually, I haven't gigged in a while because of my business and everything. But for the longest time, still carried that as a side gig. And it's great to connect with another musician. I didn't know that about you. I'm glad we stumbled across that.
That's funny.
So anyway, you said you were selling more than the next guy. They love to buy from you. And why do you think that success happened that way?
Well, you know what? I've always had an ability to take complex things and make them simple. That could be because I'm a simple guy. But let me tell you the more interesting point.
Please.
I was selling twice as much as the next person, and I was the most hated person in the company by sales management.
Why?
Because they kept asking me to do stupid stuff rather than do it.
That never happens today.
And I wasn't political enough to understand that. I just said, why are you asking me to do stupid stuff?
Okay.
And a VP of sales, a director of sales doesn't want to hear that from a newbie salesperson.
Of course.
And it's even more frustrating when that newbie salesperson is killing it in terms of orders.
Yeah, you're right.
So, long story short, I swore that if I ever got the chance, and it wasn't clear at the time, if I ever got the chance to manage a sales team, I would never make them do stupid stuff.
Awesome. Well, as a sales professional, I am very thankful for you of having that attitude. And I'm thankful for the people out there like you who have that same attitude, but please continue.
So when just to cut to a little bit ahead, when I did finally get my chance, my sales management style is what I call let the stars shine. I want the best. I'm not intimidated by them. I love them and I treat them well. And I know everybody has to sell their own way. But let's now regress a little bit.
Okay.
I did eventually want to get out of medical equipment, and I went into software, started killing it again, suddenly became VP of sales and took off from there. And I'd like to say that I'm right now at a point which is the result of a carefully mapped out career plan that I followed step by step. But as we've discussed before, that's not how it happens. Opportunities come, you take them, you don't. It evolves organically. But what I've been doing for the past 25 or so years is joining small technology startups, putting in place the sales and marketing teams, the support infrastructure, the systems and processes to take that organization to the next level. There's a scientific and engineering software company just outside of Boston called the MathWorks. I would suspect a number of your subscribers have heard of these folks. I took them from 0 to 30 million. That's what I do. I've had some successes, and as I've mentioned, I've had some failures. One vulture capitalist many years ago pointed me out in a crowd. This was one of their presentations, with a bunch of startups and all this. He said, "That JR over there, he's a rocket pack that an entrepreneur straps on." He was trying to embarrass me, put me on the spot.
Okay.
But I immediately said, "You're right, because sometimes we blow up on the pad. Sometimes we make it into orbit, and every once in a while we hit the moon." But that's kind of what I do. Is I join companies, we step on the gas, and hopefully we have some success.
Excellent. Tell me, would you like to share one of the things that didn't succeed, or maybe something that didn't go the way you needed it to or wanted it to?
Sure. Not too long after after I left the MathWorks, I founded my own company based on a software product that a developer had made for on a Unix workstation way back when.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew there was a tremendous market for it in the PC world if he could just port it over to the PC. He told us he could do it in 6 months. Well, we knew what developers, when they say 6 months, that means probably 18 months. So we actually had enough funding to last for 30 months. Well, 18 months came and went, 24 months came and went, 30 months came and went, 36 months came and went. He still never produced the product. We had lined up $4 million in orders if we had been able to produce the product, but instead we went out of business and went and found jobs. So great learning experience. You learn how to do a lot with little.
Yeah.
And the big takeaway was, don't count your chickens before they're hatched. Holy cow.
Wow. That's huge. And we've all gone through experiences where things fell apart or didn't go the way, or maybe lost jobs or lost opportunities. But having to take, in our conversation prior to this, you had told me that you had sold all of this and then it never produced. So what was the fallout other than losing the opportunity? Did you have to go back and make things right with the people that you had sold to, or what would you do in that situation?
Well, they knew that they were pre-orders for a beta software system.
Gotcha.
So, these things happen, and we didn't actually get any money or take any money. It was just POs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was what it was, and we went away, and it was not pretty, but.
Gotcha. Cool. But you brought something up interesting earlier that I want to just kind of dig in. I wasn't planning on doing this, but let's go to your sales management philosophy, because obviously whenever you were coming up and you had those managers who didn't like to hear, and didn't, you said, "I'll never be that guy." And then you mentioned how you approach it, your philosophy on management. How did you say that again?
Let the stars shine.
All right. So let's talk about it. How do we let the stars shine? Because I want the people who are sales leaders listening to the podcast to get the wisdom from this and kind of your philosophy. But I also want sales reps who are out there who might not be fortunate enough to have a good management team in place know that they deserve more, and that there are people out there like you who do care about them and take care of them.
Sure. Well, the first thing is that management cannot be intimidated or scared or otherwise negative toward top producers. And they have to understand a couple of things. Top producers all have their own unique approach to selling. They're not the same, and they often cannot follow a pattern or what that sales manager sitting behind a desk pushing spreadsheets happens to think is a great approach. You have to allow the top performer to be his or her own self and capitalize on their strengths. Everybody sells differently.
Sure.
And then I don't manage for the lowest common denominator. I don't care if the below average people fail. I don't even care if the average people fail. I care about the top performers, the people who really produce. My goal is to hire all top performers.
Okay.
I don't want any B players. I don't want, and look, they talk about team selling. Guess what? There is no team selling. You go out, close the darn deal. Yes, we're in a team. No, we don't work together. We're all out there selling. We sell our own way. We make it happen. Now, there can be team selling, like an inside and outside person paired together, but you have two top performers. They might help each other, they might chat, offer solutions, but there's no team selling involved. It's go out there, do your thing, have your success, be rewarded, appreciated, and congratulated for it. And I'm not going to put on silly things because the average sales rep might do better. I don't care.
Mm.
I want the top performers.
Well, let me ask you this. If you do have the top performers in there and somehow somebody that you did hire happens to be a B player or maybe even leaning towards C player, but they got the will, they've got the desire to become better. Are you pulling some of the wisdom from your other top performers to kind of help them and guide them and lead them? Or you're sharing your own wisdom and insights? How are you helping them to get better if they want?
Well, if they have that fire in the belly, and they've proven to me that they have the capability, the skills, the instincts, and the intelligence to up their game,
Mhm.
then I'll do all of the above. I will pair them with a top performer that they can shadow. I will ride with them. I will get them whatever sources of information or help they need, but they got to have that fire in the belly. Don't come to me as an average player and not be passionate, enthusiastic, and eager. The fire in the belly, to me, there's two types of fires. One, you want to make a lot of money.
Okay.
Two, you want to really advance your career by selling your way to the top.
Mm.
The best one is C, A, and B.
Mm.
Somebody who wants to make a ton of money, somebody who wants to advance in their career. If you got that fire in the belly and you have enough intelligence and instincts
Yep.
to do the job,
Yeah.
you're going to do really well with me. I will make you a top performer if you're not.
Very cool. Very cool. I like to hear that attitude and that approach. And it brings us to the first question that I was planned on asking. And it goes back to sales fundamentals because the A players, B players, C players does not matter. There's a certain set of fundamentals that they come to the table with or that they've been taught, right? And so my question to you is over the years that you've seen bringing us to current day, what are some of the sales fundamentals that you think are evergreen that still work versus some that are no longer working?
Okay. No matter what, you have to fill your pipeline. And the more you fill your pipeline, the better you're going to do. That is the single most important thing you can do. Fill your pipeline. You know, every sales meeting, I show the pipeline. I show the people, cringe. Oh boy, JR showing his funnel again, right? But that fat end of the pipeline is everything. Do you know what will scare me to death is a sales rep saying, I got to focus on closing this month. What?
Okay.
You're going to forget everything else. You're going to forget filling the pipeline and moving things. You're going to put bubbles in the pipeline so you have a great month this month and then nothing in 2 months. Please don't. Focus on the entire pipeline. And if you're going to put any attention anywhere, focus on the fat end, filling it up, because the more material you have, the better you can go. Think of it this way. Well, if you want, you can affect your close rate a small amount. If you really, really, really do great, you can go from 7% to 8%. Holy cow. On the other hand, what if you add 50% more leads to the fat end of the pipeline?
Mm,
How's that going to work for you?
that's
You want to
good.
increase your sales?
Yeah.
Go with the big percentages.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's dig in there. How has that fundamental changed over the years? How we fill the pipeline? What's the same? What's different? What you give me perspective?
In the 90s, I was mailing 1 million direct mail pieces a year, actually 1.2 million.
Wow.
We were getting anywhere from a 2 to 8% response rate that we could follow up on. It was wonderful. That's gone away.
Okay.
These days, it's really tough. There is, I like advertising on online. Google ads are good. There's a lot of ways of generating those types of leads where people raise their hands, and then strong follow up. Cold calling is still possible, still effective in certain areas. And here's the little secret: snail mails come back.
Mm,
You know why? Because nobody gets mail anymore. So
that's
if you
right.
get a mail piece, Yeah, you look at it. You put it on your desk. You look at it again tomorrow because you won't get any mail for another week or a month. That said, it's changed because of the virus. Like nobody's in the office, so I've been reluctant to mail. But
Hmm.
in 2019, I had a lot of success again mailing, believe it or not, because nobody's doing it.
So right now in the new now, as I heard somebody call it, and we're having to make these adjustments with prospecting. What's the go-to right now? Are we actively prospecting? Are we still advertising and waiting for leads to come in? Is it a mix of the two? Kind of give me scope on that.
I'm focused mostly on calling and emailing actively to strategic accounts.
Gotcha.
I have a lady that worked with me 20 years ago, and she's back in calling our strategic accounts. We're what I call saturation marketing, where we're trying to call everybody from the janitor up to the CEO at this organization, so that we create a buzz. We
Mm.
are doing email in conjunction with it.
Hmm.
And we have actually, there's some interesting new database systems out there that use a little bit of AI, a little bit of web scraping, some unique approaches. There's the standard commercial databases everybody uses. Those are getting better, more accurate phones and emails. But there's also some new and cool ones that have a different approach, especially if you're in a niche market.
Oh, I got it. Cool. Excellent. So, what are some of the things that you're still depending upon from a sales fundamental standpoint, other than filling the pipeline on the front? What are some old standbys, evergreen, important stuff that are sales fundamentals that are still here and still strong?
Well, it's the basic blocking and tackling of sales. Once you've gotten somebody and you're talking to them, you need to do discovery, you need to do qualification, you need to build relationships, rapport,
Yep.
and keep people's attention is a little harder these days.
Mm.
People are assailed by all different media from all different sides. So often it's how you speak to them and what you speak about. Sometimes, I'll hear a sales rep give a presentation and then ask the customer, what do you think? Well, the customer is not even thinking about you at this point. They're looking at the 15 emails that they missed while you were talking,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So sometimes just changing a little tweak to the wording, like, what's your reaction
Mm.
to what you just saw?
Mm.
Suddenly they have to think versus
Right.
saying, I don't know, or, going to chew on it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that it's the basics, slight tweaking in terms of keeping people's attention. Perhaps you need to entertain a little bit more, tell a little bit more story, less data and specs, have
Mm.
a narrative going that keeps their attention, because that's the challenge. You see it on Zoom conferences, right? There's 10 people on the call. Well, you can see somebody's looking up, someone's looking to the side. They're all reading emails.
Yep.
They're chatting. They're
Yep.
doing everything but listen to you.
Gotcha.
And that's just the way it is. We're all like that.
Yeah.
You and I right now could be answering an email as we chat. But the point is if you're entertaining, if you tell a narrative, if you have some passion, enthusiasm, that's going to get you a lot farther these days of Zoom conferencing.
Yeah, and that brings up another thing, because we're talking about attention, we're talking about engagement, we're talking about, in essence, the quality of relationship that we're able to establish. Now that we're not belly to belly, we got to be digital to digital, but we hear so much about data-driven selling, but we also know the value and importance, the evergreen of relationships. So, how do you reconcile the two? Talk to me about that.
Back in the 90s, they talked about the internet and disintermediation, right?
Yeah.
It was just going to absolutely prevent salespeople and buyers from ever needing to speak again, ever needing to do anything again. Well, we know that's a bunch of crap. In fact, people are human, humans socialize. The buying and selling process has not changed. The technology has changed, absolutely, but it's still human buyer, human seller, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So the only difference is we have multi-channels to contact various buyers:
Mm.
email, chat, LinkedIn, phone, Zoom. And what the sales rep has to do is keep the human process going and do it through the specific channel that that buyer tends to like.
Mm.
And I said channel, but it may very well be channels.
Mm-hmm.
I have some prospects, some customers that like to get a text from me and then a call, or some will answer an email, but they won't on a chat. Or I have some customers that just want to talk on LinkedIn. It's all good. I don't care, but I am very conscious of which customer wants what,
Yeah.
because I just want to make that human process that has not changed for probably centuries as easy for the buyer as possible.
That's good. And so I'm gonna let you take this any direction you want. You can take it in multiple directions, whatever's relevant and important to you. At what point, because you mentioned this earlier on one level, how a manager will be stuck behind his spreadsheets or sifting through data or crunching numbers to try to make reason and direction. And then you have some industries where they're very data driven because of proving their products can perform or the best solution. So either one of those really, at what point, establishing that we have that the relationship and the buying process and the conversation with the customers paramount and key, at what point does data play a role that's significant to make that work the way it's supposed to for the customer and for you?
Yeah. Um, to me, the only metric that matters is sales and revenues. I'm very suspicious of all other metrics because there's a famous law out there that says the minute you name something as an important metric, it becomes useless because all you're going to get is that metric from your
Mm,
salespeople, right?
good.
So the minute you say number of dials, that's what matters. Well, you're going to get numbers of dials
Yeah.
up the wazoo, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the only metric to me that matters ultimately is the sale dollars revenues. Now, what we can look at is what's working right to produce those dollars, what isn't working right. So watching the pipeline metrics is really critical. How many folks have gone from suspect to prospect? How many have gone from prospect to qualified prospect? How many have gone to hot prospect? And tracking that individually by rep for themselves. When I hire someone and I get them going in my system, tracking pipeline and all that, I tell them, look, these numbers I'm giving you every week, I don't need them. I know how you're doing at the end of every month. There's a number on your forehead.
Yep.
You need these weekly numbers to know where your bubbles are, where you're not getting the conversion rate you want. And your profile is different from Sam's over here. His is totally different.
Yeah.
But
And no, I
go
was
ahead.
go. You were going to finish. My apologies. I was thinking ahead, but go for it. Keep going.
No, go ahead. You go ahead. I'm
So
ready.
what I'm hearing is that the importance to the rep is being able to look at the data that shows what's going on in their pipeline, in their specific territory with their customers that are lagging indicators in the sense that we look back at them, but leading indicators because if I'm able to be proactive about changing those places that I need to improve, then that kind of predicts where I'm going to be able to do or how I'm going to be able to perform. Am I getting that right?
That's right. Absolutely. And what you have to become is a master of your own pipeline
Mm,
because yours is going to be different. You might have a 7% conversion rate at this level where somebody else has a 5%. You're really good at that, but you're not so good at the next point. That's okay.
yeah,
And it could be your market, it could be your customers, it could be how the product fits in your place.
sure.
There's a lot of those issues, but you know your market and you begin to get a handle on what you need to do to hit your numbers, increase your numbers, grow your numbers.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, it's good stuff. Let me ask you this: in your world and in your environment, and we didn't have this plan, but I think it's take it direction you want. But one thing that I'm very passionate about and I love talking about across industries is negotiating. And sometimes negotiations is a dollar and cent thing. In other words, we can give discounts, we can lower our prices, we can quote higher or lower margins to get the business, but it's not always that conversation. There's so many variables that can be negotiated throughout the sales process and the sales conversation. In your world, what is a negotiation and what do y'all and what if anything do you guys negotiate?
The most important principle for me and my salespeople is making the customer a winner. I want the customer to walk away from any negotiation saying, I did well.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't, if they don't, if they feel that they got taken or they only got so-so of a deal, you've not won a long-term customer.
Mm.
I want my customers to quote unquote win every negotiation. Of course, we have our limits. We're going to make money. We're going to do well.
Of
But my
course.
customers are going to win and
Talk
be
to me.
happy.
Talk to me about any variables or concessions that you guys are able to give. The kinds that cost you little to nothing but mean a lot to the customer. And it might not be dollars and cents. It might be value adds. It might be terms. It might. What are some of those variables in your world?
Well, some of it comes back to what you were talking about relationship. Let me tell you a big win that I offered that they didn't realize at the time, but now they do.
Yeah.
What I've been doing with my clients is a team lunch every couple of months, and that's with their team and our team. We all get together. I send them all a $25 Grubhub coupon to buy them lunch. Everybody gets to chat for an hour. It's not totally work related. I just did one. We talked about our experiences with the crazy Halloween we just had.
Okay.
And that's an added value that the manager, 2 days after we did this, he called me up and said, I got to expand our relationship. We're really seeing value with you folks.
That's awesome.
So it's given value that doesn't even necessarily cost money. And sometimes you say, well, that's just common sense. That just makes sense. But if you don't do it, it's not common sense. It doesn't make sense. So giving people added value in terms of anything along those lines that doesn't even cost money. I'm very reluctant to ever discount or anything along those lines, but we'll make sure that they're real happy, that they're in the loop. There's, a lot of transparency and a lot of value received beyond just what they're paying for.
No, that's good, and I really appreciate that. And I think so many times sales reps, unfortunately, try to default to discounts or changing prices or competing on price because they're not stopping to think long enough about who's this person I'm in front of, what's the relationship, how can we expand it, what are they looking for beyond the dollars and cents that we could offer them or give them, and being creative enough to say, you know what, last ditch effort is going to be to discount or to lower prices. We only have so much room anyway. What can I give? What can I ask for to be able to get that win for the customer as well as the company and keep that relationship long term? So I think what you were saying there is absolutely spot on. If I may, let me jump ahead to a couple of more questions. And I've got them written here because as good as my memory is, it's not as good as I would like it to be. So let's go to this one right here. What's the best advice you've gotten and the worst advice you've gotten when it comes to selling?
The best advice I've gotten was from a grizzled old veteran. I was pretty young in the business, just getting started, in fact. And his comment was, if you don't ask, the answer is no. Simple.
Yeah, and powerful.
Powerful is exactly right.
What about the best advice?
Well, that was the best
advice. I'm sorry. What about the worst advice? I'm sorry.
The worst advice I ever got. My first software company was a very complicated piece of software that could only be understood by PhD physicists.
Yeah.
So I'm at my first trade show. It's my first week on the job. And this big time speaker at the conference, PhD physicist, he came up to me, he says, son, you're wasting your time here. You'll never be able to sell software like this to people like us. We don't buy from salespeople. 6 months later, I had grown sales big enough we were hiring him as a consultant.
Nice.
So that was the worst piece of advice I had ever gotten, was that salespeople couldn't sell technical stuff to technical end users.
I've heard versions of that. Give you an example of my own sales career, my pharmaceutical sales career. I came from a small entrepreneurial startup. Actually, they'd been established for a while, but they were entrepreneurial because they didn't give us a budget and we had to sell, right? And so we had to use our wit and the training that we were given. I moved on to a big company, and one of the worst pieces of advice that I got from someone in the company was, you'll never sell this product. You have to get the doctors face to face so they can sell each other. I said, watch me. And, and so it's like, they don't know where you come from. They don't know what you're capable of. And sometimes the worst advice is self-limiting on their part, because of what they believe is possible, but they don't know what's inside of you and what's inside of us. And you just got to push back and say, no, we're going to make this happen.
And in both those cases, my PhD physicist and your friend, they were thinking that it wasn't a human process, this sales process. It was rational, scientific, technical. And we both know that's not how it works.
They aren't.
It's all about the human relationship.
Yeah, it's so much, and when people don't, I had just another example of this. I had a teacher in college who told me, I had once entertained, I was a guy who crammed 4 years of college into 6. and I only got a bachelor's degree. But anyway, so this one guy who was a teacher of mine, I had mentioned, my dad's a chemical engineer growing up, and I had mentioned, hey, I might go into engineering because it seems to be a great profession. That dude, without missing a hit, looks at me. He goes, "No way it's ever going to happen. You're not cut out for it. You'll never make it." And it ticked me off. It really did. But I think there's something about self-assessment that I had to look at and say, you know what? Maybe I could push. Maybe I could become that person. But even if I pushed myself over that line, I'd have been miserable doing it. And that's not a win. So
Right.
so maybe there's a little bit in that when we get those pieces of feedback from people who don't believe we can. It's self-awareness to be able to say, yeah, I can, but it's probably not worth it, versus saying, you know what, watch me, buddy. I'm gonna do it because there's something I understand that you don't. And you're talking about right there, that human process, that human dynamic. Good stuff, man. Let me see. Let me see here. What do you think that most people miss when it comes to selling?
I'm going to go back to the fat end of the pipeline.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you, nobody likes it. Nobody wants to do it. It's the most important thing you can do.
Yeah.
And if anybody falls down, it's right there.
Well, let me ask you this. It's good. I believe you and I'm aligned with you, but why? Why do people avoid that end of the pipeline?
Well, it's cold things, cold calling, cold whatever, and it doesn't always have to be. If my life insurance agent was a former professional hockey player, right?
Okay.
The guy's a nice guy. Trust me, he's not going into neurosurgery anytime soon.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
But they told him, after you've signed a client or after you've met with a client, ask him for 5 referrals of friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
He does it religiously. Not everybody gives him anything, but he asks it every time.
Yeah.
And he's built a tremendous business because of it. And so there's many ways to fill the fat end of the pipeline, but people don't think of that. I got to start dialing for dollars, just pick up phone books. No, you don't have to. Try a referral program or try something else. Go do some networking, do something else. But fill that pipeline. But I think people just think, oh boy, I'm going to have to start cold calling. And you might, by the way,
Yeah.
and that's not the end of the world. You need to get used to that. But, I just, when I see people falling down, it's generally the fat end of the pipeline.
You know what? And I'm so glad you brought that up. And it gave me a creative thought here, is that, let's say cold outreach is not your thing. You're not good at it. You don't know how to do it. It frustrates you. You'd rather get a root canal, whatever. You can go on Google or YouTube and find somebody who's actually good at it, learn from them and try that to make it work out. People aren't being creative enough to say, okay, I can't do this. Rather than saying I can't do this, say, how can I do this? And let me go seek out somebody that's good at doing it, model what he's doing or model what she's doing, and become good at it. And look, let's go back to the music conversation. Okay. You're a trumpet player. I'm a saxophone player. And we were taught, when we were growing up playing music, sheet of music, and we're practicing, we slow down the metronome and we isolate and we take it slow and then we speed it back up. But if there's just one piece of the music that's giving me a problem, I don't just blow through it and keep trying to play it and try to play it at breakneck speed. I circle it. I slow it down. I practice until I can play it slow until I cannot mess it up. And then I put it back in the rest of the piece. And I think so many people see this one piece of the equation of filling the pipeline. They're like, I can't cold call. I can't outreach. I can't do this. This is painful. I suck at it. I suck at marketing, whatever the case might be. Well, look, let's isolate that. Let's go dig and find or the people who know how to do it, listen to what they have to say, make it our own, and do it. And boom, guess what? Now we can fill that pipeline, whatever that looks like.
And you hit on the key points with the music analogy: practice and repetition.
Yeah.
You get better and better. It becomes easier and easier. The more calls you make, the easier it gets.
Well, but and let me take that even a step further and say this. I don't know how it is on a trumpet, but I know on a saxophone, if I create bad habits with my hand, and like say my top hand is like this, my sons are going through this right now. Eventually, they're going to have to correct that habit if they want to have dexterity and be able to play quicker. And what's happening is that some people are just beating their head up against the wall on the wrong technique and process and saying it doesn't work for me.
Right.
No, dude, go find a better way of doing it and then come back and try again. Don't keep beating your head up against that wall.
Well, one thing I tell inside salespeople when I'm hiring them or when I'm training them or coaching them is that they have a wonderful laboratory. They're going to be making scores of dials a day, certainly a week. Mm-hmm. Try one approach for the next 10 calls, then try a different approach for the next 10 calls. Experiment, test, try. What a wonderful laboratory you have for improving yourself and your understanding of the process and, in fact, your career. Treat it as an interesting experiment that you're constantly working on to improve and get better. Because humans are all different. Nobody has all the answers to all the equations. It just doesn't exist. So all you can do is, going back to the music analogy, build up a bigger portfolio of pieces you know and recognize and can play. Because ultimately, when you get to a certain level as a professional, all you work on is your repertoire.
Absolutely. And another thing I think, JR, that salespeople don't do because it's slow and painful, is that when they get to the end of a sale, whether they won or lost, they don't take enough time to self-evaluate and say, why did I win or why did I lose? What could I have done better? What did I do right? And carry that forward. And I think when they win, they're ready to get on to the next deal, ready to get on to the next win. And they don't mind the goal that came from what they just did. And then when it's, I just lost this, I don't want to look at that. That's painful. That's a self-reflection. I don't want to deal with it. But in your experience, if they take that time consistently to do that, what can it do for their results?
Well, you can, again, it's like treating it as an experiment. You can understand what happened, what caused it, and make changes from there and say, well, you know what? I think that it was because of this. And you never know. You could lose a deal and you think it's because you said X, and it's because the guy's brother-in-law won the deal, right? So, you never 100% know, but you can start to make some, if you truly treat every sale as an experiment and a test, and you study it just as you're suggesting, you can learn a lot. You can build your repertoire of, okay, this type of buyer, that type of market, this type of pain, that type of situation, and see what was working, what didn't work, and draw some conclusions and refine your approach.
Cool. What would you tell sales reps, brand new, seasoned, and veterans about the world we're living in right now and being able to maintain their momentum and success, given all the changes we've been through?
I need to tell one more musical story.
Please. Please.
I was a professional before I turned 16. The union had to pay me cash under the table. Okay. Yeah. When I turned 16, they could suddenly they had driven to me a union card on my 16th birthday so I could be legit. It was probably a month after that, I was playing in a pro-am concert, okay? And what this means is they hired a professional orchestra, but to increase gate sales, they invited in soloists from the community. Because if Joe, your neighbor, was playing, he'd bring in his neighbors, his friends, his family, okay? So we're in the middle of this concert, and this amateur trumpet player got up and wailed on a solo. Still gives me goosebumps how well this guy played. I turned to this crusty, I was 16, mind you. I turned to this crusty old trumpet player. He had been a pro for 30 years, didn't much like me. I was an upstart kid.
Yeah.
And I said, "Did you hear that? How come that guy's not a professional?" He looked down his nose at me. He said, "Kid, on any given day, a good amateur can play as well as a professional. The professional does it every day."
Yeah.
That was a light bulb moment for me.
Yeah.
I will ask anybody, any sales person, "Are you a professional?" They'll all say, "Oh, yeah, I get paid for this. Yeah, yeah, yeah." And I'll say, "Wait a minute. Are your sales up and down? Do they look like a sine wave? Good 1 month, bad 2 months, good 2 months, bad 1 month?"
Mm.
That's amateur hour. That's not a professional sales effort. Professional sales effort is consistent, disciplined, constant, steady growth. That's a professional sales effort. There's two ways to be a professional sales rep. The first critical component is you're a student of the metrics, those pipelines. You have to know those inside and out. Again, I don't need them. I know how you're doing at the end of every month. You need them. But the second one brings me to professional football. You have a star quarterback like Tom Brady. He has a nutrition coach. He has an exercise coach. He has a stretching coach. He has a quarterback coach. He has an offensive coach, coordinator. He has a head coach. Tom Brady demands coaching. He doesn't put up with it. He doesn't tolerate coaching. He demands coaching. And that's what a good sales rep does.
Boom. Yes. And how many sales reps avoid mentorship and coaching because they don't want to be a little uncomfortable?
Not the top ones.
Not the top ones. Everyone else, the B players and the C players.
I will sit back. I've told many of my salespeople, I'm a tremendous coach, but I'm busy. You need to get my time. I don't need to get your time.
Yeah.
The top ones are always there asking for my time.
Right. And the rest are avoiding.
The rest think they know what they're doing.
Interesting. No, I couldn't agree with you more, man. I tell you, it's interesting, and I'll do it this way: the coaching, right? But also the practice. Going back to the music analogy, going back to the Tom Brady analogy, the practice. I just heard this, and I can't remember where I heard it. It said that the will to win is not the key thing. It's the will to prepare to win. That's the key thing. And it's like, and I go back to that first pharmaceutical sales job I was in. One thing that sales reps hate, like worse than CRM, is role play, practice and role play. But let me tell you something. My first pharmaceutical sales company, for 8 hours a day, 8 days straight during new hire training, had us role playing in front of video cameras, making us painfully uncomfortable. But I'm gonna tell you what, when they spit us out on the other side, we were loaded for bear, and there was nothing that could shake our tree.
Yep.
And I think in addition to your coaching and your mentorship, I think reps that will take it upon themselves to block and tackle, to practice, to show up to practice, not just a performance, will outperform. And like you said, be consistent and not on the sales roller coaster. And it comes down to what you said, man. It's the music. It's the same way with music and sports. Executing, blocking, tackling, showing up to practice, giving everything you got. Don't just expect to, be professional and not, show up with a consistent performance. It's not going to happen if you don't develop the skill sets.
Yep, absolutely.
I love this conversation. Last thing is this: we've gone to the pipeline, so we know that's important, and filling that pipeline on the front end. But if you could leave our audience, and it could be for the sales leaders or the sales professionals, what's one piece of advice that you would give them to help them sustain their success or to improve their success?
Sure. Don't get in the trap to thinking you have to be an expert closer. In my experience, closing, if the sale is done properly, is anticlimactic. It's simply the result of a business deal coming to an orderly end.
There you go.
So if you've done the job correctly, you and the prospect know where it's going, know when it's going, and there is no magic closing words that you need to use. There's nothing like that. It's just the culmination of a business process. So don't focus so much on closing, focus on getting to a simple and easy close that is actually anticlimactic. And you already know what the answer is going to be if you've done the job right.
That's brilliant, man. That is wonderful advice. I'm 100% in alignment with that, because I'm with you, because if I've done my job all the way through the process, it would be ridiculous for me to push, to coerce, to manipulate. And it tells me that I'm doing something wrong. But if I do it the correct way, like you said, I'll know. We'll know, and we'll just lean into it.
When I join startups, typically it's with a technical entrepreneur, and he'll say, I need help closing. And I'll say, yeah. No, you don't. You need help with your pipeline.
Boom. That's awesome, dude. JR, anything else to put forth, or?
No, it's been fun. This is great. You obviously know what you're doing, and so it's been a real pleasure to chat with you.
Well, you obviously know what you're doing too, and I really appreciate you investing some time with me today. And I tell you what, whenever we get down the road a little ways and see how the world's changed around us, let's revisit and let's have some conversations about how to be successful moving forward.
Hopefully in a booming, surging, growing economy.
Yes, sir. Please, 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 please. Have a great day, and we will talk soon.